5 minutes past 7 o'clock in Trinidad and Tobago on this Wednesday. I have to remember to highlight at least a couple of paragraphs of page 20 for you all before we wrap up this morning. I'll try to remember that. But the world economy continues to be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. Shortages and speculation of a recession dominate certain parts of the globe, which inevitably will trickle down to Trinidad and Tobago once these situations take effect. Stakeholders on the sister isle of Tobago are paying much closer attention to these developments ahead of the upcoming budget presentation, which is due towards the end of this month. The allocation of funds from central government and how they are spent by the Tobago House of Assembly will be crucial in Tobago's ability to weather any economic storm. Well, to give us a perspective, we're joined by the president of the Tobago Business Chamber, Attorney at Law Martin George, to talk about his expectations. Mr. George, well, I've given the lay of the land, given the introduction. What are your expectations from the budget presentation? Good morning to you.
Yeah, hi, good morning to you, Fazil, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Well, Fazil, there's a difference between what I realistically expect and what I would like to see. So I expect, unfortunately, that it might be more of the same in the sense that if you look at the past few years, Fazil, the expenditure from the THA, it has been about 88% of their budget has been recurrent expenditure. They're paying wages, salaries, they're paying bills, they're paying suppliers, they're paying for goods and services. So basically, it's just a spending budget. So in other words, there's very little room for capital investment, infrastructural development, and for laying the foundation for long-term economic growth. So in other words, basically, it's like this scenario that we see with so many Trinbagonians who go to North America. You're working 3-4 jobs just to keep up, to keep yourself at zero, basically. That's all you're really doing. You're not earning any extra that you could put away to say, well, okay, look, I'm building up a savings, that kind of thing. No, you're just earning to stay alive, to be able to pay the bills for this month so you could last until the next month and you start all over again. So unfortunately, I don't think I will see anything, that is thinking outside the box, that is going to be particularly dynamic and creative to get Tobago out of that. I mean, unfortunately, I have to say dependency syndrome, if you understand me, because every year you have to come to central government basically with your begging bowl and say, sir, can I have a bit more, please? If you understand me, a la Oliver Twist, So I hope, however, right? So I mean, that's what I think realistically we'll see. But I hope that within the next year or two, that this new administration is going to seriously start to lay some kind of groundwork for creating a sustainable economic framework for Tobago, whereby they are able to wean Tobago gradually off this economic umbilical cord that they are tied to with the central government. That is my hope over the next year or two, but I don't think I will see it in this budget presentation.
Well, I now know why the budget presentation is later this month, because the begging bowl is actually in LA. The Prime Minister has gone up there with that for the Summit of the Americas. So they have to wait for the begging bowl to come back and then go across to Scarborough for that budget presentation. But in all seriousness, Martin George, and you're right. I mean, given, as you said, almost 88% goes towards recurrent expenditure, and especially given the difficult economic times, it's unreasonable to expect anything dramatic from a budget presentation. But just based on your understanding of the mechanics of this budget presentation and how the relationship with Trinidad and Tobago works, is there any leeway, any way that the Tobago House of Assembly administration can facilitate that sort of thinking of the box that you're talking about without financial contributions? What I'm trying to say is that, is there any way that they could actually start the process to facilitate things and make it easier to do business or make it easier to grow your business without necessarily saying you need a significant injection of cash from Port of Spain to get that done?
Well, the thing is, I mean, some of it would still require central government intervention. But I mean, one of the things I would like to see them lobbying for is the immediate and unconditional repeal of the Foreign Investment Act. If that is done, then you would have many businesses, many investors, many hoteliers, persons who may want to put up like villas, guest houses, whatever, who may be able to invest directly in Tobago. And for you, it's very interesting. Trinidad and Tobago is in a forex crunch. We are struggling for foreign exchange. And it is mind-boggling as to why the government would keep this archaic, anachronistic legislation in place, which is a direct block and bar to any foreign investment directly in Tobago. The fact of the matter is that, the idea and thinking was apparently that, they didn't want to have Tobagonians sell out all their lands to foreigners. That was the thinking from what I understand. But as I told the then Chief Secretary when this legislation was, being touted, that was Mr. Orville London, I told him, I said, Chief, all you're doing is you're shifting it so that instead of foreigners coming and buy out the lands, it's going to be rich Trinidadians coming and buying out the lands. And that's the reality. So it's not to say that it's stopping anybody from selling their land, but what you are doing is you are stopping any direct foreign investment in terms of persons who want to come with a big project or anything so. And that's the challenge. And there's no real benefit at all to keeping that legislation in place. And it is going to generate tremendous input of foreign exchange for both Trinidad and Tobago. So that's one thing for sure that can be done. And it's a simple fix. I've also suggested respectfully that the government ought to consider making Tobago either a duty-free zone or a VAT-free zone. And it's not impossible to do for you. And I'll tell you, it's not something that's going to benefit Tobagonians alone. Trinidadians will benefit tremendously because, in other words, anytime you vacation in Tobago, anytime you go to Tobago, in fact, you may even now start going to Tobago to do some of your shopping. If your hardware items for you are 12.5% less in Tobago than they are in Trinidad, then it makes sense to do your shopping there. You're going to see so much investment flowing into Tobago from a simple provision such as that. It would then become the ideal retirement destination. If you think of it for you, when you retire, I mean, of course, you are about 50 years away from that. But I mean, eventually, when you reach to that point, you would want somewhere where you know that a fixed income or a fixed budget can go further. So therefore, if you have a destination which is automatically 12.5% less in terms of prices than the other island, obviously Tobago would be the choice. So these are things that can be discussed, can be done, and it's a benefit and fillip for both islands and for both, sets of people. It's not just for Tobagonians. So I am hoping that we start thinking creatively in these ways.
But are you just on that second point? Wouldn't that have the unintended consequence of a lot of Trini businesses moving to Tobago to capitalize on that situation?
And what is wrong with that? That is great because that is investment, that is business, that is going to be development for Tobago also. You see, we can't be so narrow-minded and parochial in our thinking to say, well, we don't want Trinidadian businessmen coming to Tobago. No, let them come, because at the end of the day, Tobagonians have to learn, have to grow, have to develop. They may be able to partner with some of these Trinidadian businessmen. They may be able to, develop strategies and initiatives, even for the foreign investors. What I have suggested is that the THA look at getting the central government to have some sort of legislation whereby you're saying, look, if a foreigner wants to make a direct investment in Tobago by way of a project, a hotel, whatever, they must have a 10% local Tobago partner input as an investor and a shareholder with them, so that you have that knowledge exchange for you. You have that growth, that learning curve, that Tobagonians can now be part of a bigger enterprise and they themselves can grow, learn, and develop. We must never be afraid of competition. We must never be afraid of, other businesses coming in. We must learn from them and grow and develop our own similarly.
And I think we're seeing something like that happening in Guyana right now because of the huge amounts of investment taking place.
That's right.
They have local
And Guyana
content.
is actually opening its doors and inviting people to come in and invest. So we can't continue to have a closed economy, but yet still say that we want to bat on the world stage. We can't have it both ways. We need to open up the economy that way. We need to, invite investors. We need to make it easy to do business in Tobago, so therefore a lot of the services that people still have to go down to Port of Spain for or have to transact in Port of Spain, the government has to ensure that you can do those things online. Look, Fizzy, we are so backward. We still have so many government offices where they insist you must come in and sign an original signature. Fizzy, you listen, in the US, in other developed countries, everybody's using electronic signatures. I manage properties in the US from right here in Trinidad. Everything I do, I pay light bill, water bill, everything. Everybody uses electronic signatures. So it's unbelievable that we are still so backward in our thinking, but yet still we want to be first world in our outlook. We can't have it both ways.
And therefore, what you're talking about there still takes us back to a facilitation by central government of the necessary legislation.
Right, right. And that's the point for you. So, in other words, this is facilitation without necessarily having to make that financial output also. So what I'm saying is that central government actually can do itself a favor and say, hey, listen, Tobago, I want to help you to help yourself. So in other words, I'm going to give you the legs, I'm going to give you the tools, I'm going to give you the legislative framework and the environment, the enabling environment, whereby you can now grow and develop your own economic activity. And that's all that's required.
But let's just say
benefit for central government also.
Sure, but let's just say that central government is still inclined to treat Tobago as a ward of the state, that they just want to control everything. Does that mean essentially that the administration of Farley Augustine and of course the secretary with responsibility for finance, that their hands are tied as to actually doing anything out of the box, as you mentioned?
Well, in terms of the legislative aspect, yes, they must meet and treat with central government in that. At present, even for the financial aspect, they must meet and treat with them. Of course, we did have previous provisions whereby the THA was enabled by central bank to be able to go out onto the capital markets, I think to be able to borrow up to $300 million. So they do have that as a facility, but again, it has to be backed by something. And if central government doesn't back it or the central bank doesn't back the facility, then of course, you would have issues there because the THA of its own doesn't have the wherewithal to be able to back those facilities in terms of, its own capital resources. So again, everything is still tied to central government. But what I'm saying is that what I want to see is that we not only ask for the financial assistance, but ask for the legislative framework to be put in place to create that enabling environment whereby we will now be able to generate our own economic activity.
And Martin Joe, this might sound like a complete triviality, but we just have a couple of minutes left. So, sometimes I wonder if people don't realize that the amount of time people waste in government offices, or as in the case of Tobagonians, having to come to Trinidad to do X, Y, Z, that the amount of productive time that is wasted. Yet you will go and pay your bills by different private agencies. You from home. You allocate one night to pay all your bills, and in that one night, you pay all your bills online. Why is it that can't be facilitated, at least for Tobagonians? They don't have to, they could have that burden removed off their shoulders of having to waste time, waste productive days and hours, sorting out things that could be done quite easily. Surely there's a monetary value to that.
And for the, I have been advocating for this for the longest while, and it's not just for Tobagonians. I think for Trinidad and Tobago on the whole, we need to understand that we are way behind. You saw, and it was very interesting. This guy, the founder of WePay, you know, he lamented. He said, "Listen, the problem with Trinidad and Tobago, as he saw it in terms of electronic commerce, is there's too much red tape and too much archaic systems in place that they basically." It serves as a hindrance to business. If you think of your normal interaction with any government department, Fazil, it is almost as if the civil servants are designed to frustrate your process rather than facilitate. And they seem to take a perverse pleasure in telling you, no, go and come back. No, that is not the right form. No, you have to get that signed in blue ink. What the hell does it matter if you sign in blue ink or black ink? No, that is our rule. You must sign in blue ink. You know, and I mean, the stupidity of it all. But the point is, they insist, and I tell you, they enjoy, they love sending you back. Go and come back. That is the wrong form. You need to fill out that and come back. And go to the back of the line again, you know, and I mean that's not the way you.
But Martin George, you know why that is. You know, and that's why the WePay individual, when he talked about that, he didn't really say it as it is, because that facilitates our bribery culture in Trinidad and Tobago. So you pay a little something to get your situation sorted out to avoid all this frustration.
Well, I mean, and we don't want that to continue. That's the reality. So therefore, we need to make the official system easier for persons who wish to do business, so that way you don't have that underground culture of, you know, passing money under the counter or under the table in order to jump a line or to get your documents processed, etc.
And therefore,
these are things we have to look at as a nation, Fizzy.
And therefore, as we conclude, and as we look forward as to whatever we can anticipate from this budget presentation, you said what you would like, but what the reality suggests that it will be. Are you almost resigned to accept that even if there's the best will in the world, it's going to be business as usual with this budget presentation?
Well, I saw that Mr. Augustine mentioned that he wants to increase the salaries for CPEP and URP workers. I was hopeful that I would hear something a bit more creative and innovative, you know, in that I was hoping that he would say, well, look, they're going to designate a proportion of the CPEP and URP workforce to now create a specialized agricultural workforce. So therefore, you can now use that as the seed to be able to start some kind of official government farms in Tobago, to be able to now start the revitalization of the agriculture industry. I was hoping to hear him talk about an agrarian awakening in Tobago, because Tobagonians love to boast, Fazil, of, you know, years ago that they used to be the breadbasket of Trinidad and Tobago. And it's time we stop living in the past and try to create this now in the present and for the future. And these are the things that I am hoping to see as, you know, innovative, you know, creations that the Chief Secretary would come up with to say, well, look, I am now doing something differently. So maybe that's a suggestion that he could think of, you know, trying to use part of the CPEP and URP workforce as a seed, you know, unit for the agriculture industry to revitalize it in Tobago.
Martin George, we want to thank you very much indeed for taking the time and for your forthright comments. As always, we appreciate your input. Let's wait and see what happens with the budget presentation when the begging bull returns from LA and goes across to Scarborough. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time.
Thanks a lot, Fazil, and have a good morning.
You're more than welcome. Before we go to the break, just to let you know, and before we go to our Tobago, your nice feature, West Indies batting first against Pakistan in the first one-day international in Multan. They are now 20-1 in the fifth over. Kyle Mayers was caught and bowled by Shaheen Shah Afridi for 3. Shea Hope is at the crease on 7. Shamar Brooks is on 10 consecutive fours for Shamar Brooks. So it's 20-1 near the end of the fifth over. The West Indies choosing to bat first against Pakistan in the first one-day international in the 45-degree heat in Multan. As we go to the break, here's a plant image from Yolanda Joseph in Maloney. Looks like one of those Joseph's Croton kind of varieties as we head to the break.